Hey there guys, alright, today we are back with some more geography now. This time we're on to France. I believe this is the last F country. So yeah, before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Alright, let's just go ahead and dive right in. I've got nothing to say here about the French before we begin. Well, actually I do. This is for the British. See, even the French can drive on the right side of the road. Maybe you should take some hints that even the French get something right. Like, can you really allow the French to uphand you like that? Huh? They drive on the right side of the road. It's the correct side of the road. Britain? You're letting the French do something better than you. For shame. Shame.
Comme certains d'entre vous le savent, un huitième de moi est français. J'ai donc en quelque sorte une obligation d'honorer mon héritage.
Oh God, we're gonna have the same audio issues that I always have with geography now.
Learn geography now! Hey everyone, I'm your host Barbie.
Oh, maybe not.
France. Pretty much everybody on the planet has heard of
That intro, though, was very quiet.
this place. I mean, immediately images of wine, cafes, embellished 18th century Baroque architecture, and people who really hate globalization of the English language. But take a step back even further, and France becomes a place with jaguars, coconuts, volcanoes, penguins, grass skirts, war dances, bamboo flutes, witch doctors, and a multifaceted history that has evolved into a people group into becoming one of the most notable nations on the planet. Alors, allons-y!
Boom.
The first thing you need to know about France is that it's not just European, but a transcontinental country that spans across 12 time
I always forget that they still hold on to quite a lot of their colonial holdings.
zones, more than any other country in the world. Mais comment est-ce que possible? Laissez-moi expliquer, gros garçon. France is kind of divided into two main parts. The European metropolitan France, where about 95% of the population lives, and the overseas French regions, departments, and territories,
Call them what they are. Colonies.
otherwise known as the Département et Territoire d'Outre-mer, or DOM-TOM. Before we tell you
Dum-dum.
what they are, let's explain the difference between them. Regions have exactly the same legal status as mainland France and the same civil, penal code, and administrative social tax laws. However, they can be slightly adapted to suit the region's particular needs. In collectivities, the autonomy rises and they are empowered to make their own laws, except in certain areas like defense, currency, trade, and diplomacy. The overseas
Colonialism. Oh, sorry.
These regions are Guadeloupe and Martinique in the Caribbean, French Guiana in South America, which by the way has the Kourou Space Center, disputably the best in the world because it adds an extra gravitational slingshot effect because it's so close to the equator of the Earth, and Reunion and Mayotte off the coast of East Africa. The overseas collectivities are French Polynesia, you've probably heard of Tahiti, that's French Polynesia, as well as Wallis and Futuna in the Pacific, Saint Pierre and Miquelon right off the coast of Canada, Saint Barthélemy and Saint Martin, which is the only place in France that has a border with the Netherlands, as the Dutch own the southern part of the island, located all in the Caribbean. The only islands that lie under the title of overseas territories are the French Southern and Antarctic Islands, or the TAAF. These islands are made up
Taff.
of the Kerguelen Islands, the St. Paul and Amsterdam Islands, you can probably guess who used to own those, the Crozet Islands, and Adélie, the claimed slice of Antarctica that is technically not recognized thanks to the Antarctic Treaty. And as of 2007, the scattered islands in the Indian Ocean, remember the Comoros episode, were added to make the 5th district of the territory, even though half of them are disputed with Comoros, Seychelles, and Mauritius. These islands are mostly uninhabited and only house temporary military or scientific personnel. Finally, France administers two special territories that don't quite fall into any of the previously mentioned categories. There's the uninhabited Clipperton Island off the coast of Mexico, which has a crazy murder story behind it. And last but not least, there's New Caledonia, which has a special particular status out of the French-administered overseas territories. New Caledonia is the only one that's vying for a kind of somewhat independence, as the political power was passed to the native Kanak peoples. There is a weird dual French EU and New Caledonian citizenship thing going on, and in 2018 they will hold a referendum to either remain or leave France. And thanks
How'd that vote go? Because obviously it's past 2018 now.
to all these territories, they together give France the second largest executive economic zone in the world after the US. Whew. Okay, now let's go back to metropolitan Europe, France. The country is located in Western Europe, bordered by 8 other nation states. Don't forget little Andorra and Monaco, along the coast by the English Channel and the Bay of Biscay in the north and west, as well as the Mediterranean Sea to the south. Mainland France is sometimes referred to as the hexagon, since if you tilt your head a little bit, it kind of looks like it has 6 sides. Quite frankly, I was always under the impression that it kind of looked like a teapot with feet. Mainland France
Epot. Barbie, what the fuck?
France is also divided into 13 regions, including Corsica Island, 18 altogether if you include the overseas regions, with the capital, largest city, as well as the main cultural and commercial center, Paris. We could talk on and on about Paris, what with the unbelievably designed metropolitan layout, the rich vibe.
Yeah, Paris is well designed. It is well designed. I will I shit on the French, but I forget his name, but he designed the Paris really well. But largely, I think it was designed as a way to make sure that the people of Paris couldn't, blockade the roads and stop the military. I think that wasn't that what the overhaul design of Paris was for? Was to keep the people from being able to rebel effectively. Am I remembering things right?
Vibrant atmosphere, the juxtaposition of classically adorned historical sites along neo-contemporary architecture, the food, the shops, and of course, au soleil, sous la pluie, à midi ou à minuit, il y a tout ce que vous voulez aux Champs-Élysées. But that
I had to learn that song in French class too. It's giving me PTSD. Ah!
in itself would take too long, and we gotta get through 3 more segments. The busiest airports are the 2 Paris twins, Charles de Gaulle and Orly International, as well as Nice, Côte d'Azur, and the second and third largest cities, Lyon Saint-Exupéry and Marseille Provence International. At around
his French is pretty good.
643,000 square kilometers, France is the largest country in the EU. The interesting thing about France is that it's kind of divided into areas that historically had their own distinct cultural identity. Some of the most notable ones being Occitania, Savoy, Brittany, Normandy, Alsace, a section of the Basque Country, Nice, and the island of Corsica, which speaks its own dialect most French people can't even understand. These regions contribute their own unique piece of the French pie. Speaking of pie, we all know about French food, which is great because we're going to discuss more about it in... If you look at France's physical makeup, you start to kind of understand why food plays such a huge role in their culture. Everything just kind of works out perfectly for them. For metropolitan France, big, rich, nourishing rivers and their tributaries like the Garonne, Dordogne, Loire, Seine, Meuse, and Rhone entangle the entire country north to south, east to west, allowing an abundance of irrigated crop fields to exist in nearly every corner of the country. Now add on top of that the fact that the country does not have any major fault lines. They enjoy a nice oceanic European climate, and they don't suffer regularly from any major natural catastrophes. Most of the country is made up of arable flat plains or small rolling green hills that are just begging for cultivation, and voila, you have an agricultural gold mine. In fact, out of every country in the EU, France reportedly has the highest quality of soil performance and resilience, and only a few spots like in the Caucasus region and parts of Eastern Europe and Southern Russia rank higher. So there you go, food haven. In the south, you reach the mountainous regions of France, including the Pyrenees along the border with Spain, the Massif Central Plateaus, one of the most geologically studied places in Europe due to this strange formation, the Alps all along the borders with Italy and Switzerland. By the way, Switzerland was all like, yeah, I'm not gonna share Lake Léman, it's mine! And that's how Geneva was born. The highest point in France, let alone all of the EU, is Mont Blanc, found in the French Alps along the border with Italy, only second in height to the Caucasus Mountains in all of Europe. If you consider the Caucasus region a part of Europe. Some people don't, but that's another story.
Oh, that's really whole. Because Turkey is part of Asia, but north of the Caucasus is still considered Europe, because isn't it to the Urals? In regards to Russia, like you go to the Urals, and then once you pass the Urals, you're in Asia. Is that the line? I've always pictured that as the line. That's just the natural barrier, right? That's how I view things. Like the mountains are the barriers. So yeah. Ooh, I would probably... I'd consider the Caucasus shared between the 2 continents, even though technically Europe and Asia should probably just be considered one continent. But it really also depends on how you want to divide continents. But if you want to divide continents based on, like, shared cultural origins or something, and then really you gotta subdivide the continents even further so that we end up with more continents than what we have currently. Like the Afro-Eurasian landmass would probably be divided into like at least 5 continents if you were to divide it based on cultural origins or some shit. Hard to say.
France is a cornucopia of produce, dairy, and meat. Every region has their own specialty, but two things are everywhere: cheese and wine. The French are the largest consumers of cheese with over 1,200 different varieties found all over the country.
Dude.
The French also have a larger range of unconventionally consumed meat products. Most countries stick with beef, chicken, pork, maybe lamb or goat, and fish. However, the French aren't satisfied with just that. Other animals like pheasant, duck, goose, quail, rabbit, venison, veal, horse, frogs, and snails are consumed regularly. Speaking of which, the national animal is the Gallic rooster, which is why you might typically see a lot of roosters on French-affiliated symbols. In fact, France is one of the most entomophagous, that's insect-eating, countries in Europe, as about 700 million snails are estimated to be consumed every year by the French, especially in Burgundy, the largest snail-producing region in France. Unfortunately, due to the fact
You'll never see me eat a fucking snail. I have some dignity.
that the French are the highest consumers of raw or mildly cooked red meats, a huge portion of the population is either exposed or chronically infected by the Toxoplasma gondii parasite that disputably over half of the population is suspected to have. This little
What the fuck, France?
guy eventually finds its way into your brain, changes people's behaviors into being either more caring or aggressive and suspicious. Look it up, I'm not even joking. The Alps are famous for their charcuterie and fondue, Brittany for its crepes, Cantal for its
Oh, crepes. Fucking love crepes. Even though it's just a flat pancake with fruit. Fucking love that shit. I love that shit more than pancakes. Oh god. Oh.
chestnuts, Dijon for its mustard,
Or Swedish pancake. I also love Swedish pancakes because of the lingonberry. Oh fuck. Now I really want to go to like a fucking breakfast. A breakfast restaurant just for a fucking crepe.
l'Aveyron for Aligot, Rheims for its champagne, and then we get to Bordeaux. Now, first of all, every region of France likes to claim that they have the best wine. However, it's widely known that Bordeaux is disputably the home of the largest wine vineyards in the world, pumping out over 500 million liters of wine a year. The French take their produce maintenance very seriously and became the first country in the world to ban supermarkets from throwing away or destroying unsold food since February of 2016. All businesses must donate wastage to either charities or food banks. To combat crop wastage on farms, France has even opened up ugly fruit or vegetable shops in which you can buy disfigured produce for 30% off. Other than foodstuffs though, main exports are aircraft, chemicals, machinery, iron, and steel, electronics, motor vehicles, and pharmaceuticals. Of course, the overseas territories and regions also have climates and topographies that are completely different. The Caribbean islands and Guyana enjoy a warm Caribbean tropical climate, Guyana being part of the Amazon, having one of the highest forest cover densities in the world at over 95%, with over 1,100 species of birds and reptiles and mammals found in it. Reunion and Mayotte off the coast of Africa have deep jungle ravines and a common volcanic activity going on. The scattered islands are mostly uninhabited sandbanks and lagoons with nothing more than just a few trees and shrubs. The southern Antarctic islands are rocky and desolate with few grasses and vegetation. Kerguelen has these cabbage-looking things going on, and these islands typically freeze over in the winter with penguins stampeding off the coasts. New Caledonia and French Polynesia are tropical Pacific islands that enjoy
Yo, that's like a fucking fantasy fairy tale right
an
there.
abundance of rich, unspoiled, thick jungle, brush, and colorful flowers. And of course, Adelie Land is like all ice and Antarctica. All right, we've discussed borders, boundaries, mountains, food, volcanoes. Now let's talk about who's running the entire show. France is a country of people that are very, very intent on making sure that you know they are French. First of all, the country has about 67 million people and is the second largest in Europe after Germany, making 13% of the EU alone. About 85% of the population is white, 10% are North African, mostly from the Maghreb regions, a little over 3% are black, and a little less than 2% are Asian. The currency is the euro, they use the type CEF outlets, and they drive on the right side of the road.
Hear that, Britain? The right side of the road. The correct side. You got it? You got it? Okay. I'm gonna keep this bit going for every episode of Geography Now for as long as he mentions what side of the road countries drive on. I'm gonna keep this bit going.
Which makes things interesting when their neighbors from the UK come across the Channel. Now let's talk about the white people. Most white French people have some or partial Celtic or Gaulish origins, as historically the Gauls inhabited most of the centralized regions of modern-day France. That means genetically, the French and British have a lot more in common than they think. Of course, an admixture of Latin and Germanic roots also applies, as all three people groups had their stake of claim in France.
No, yeah, technically. So yeah, the French come from the Frank Germans. And then the British, they come from the a mixture of the what is it? The Angles, Saxons, and the Jutes. I always forget the Jutes. The Jutes are important too. They're the third one. Less talked about mainly because, well, the Angles, when Alfred became referred to as king of all Angles and Saxons, that was when he became pretty much the undisputed ruler of Mercia. Mercia was seen as Angle land, and then Wessex and Sussex, that was the Saxon land. I don't know where the fuck the Jutes went. I'm gonna assume Northumbria, maybe. They're never talked about. It's when I was doing my research for my thesis a year ago. Fucking, they talked about the Jutes were there, but then when Anglicization happened, the combining of the Angles and the Saxons, the Jutes just got forgotten. No one talked about them, so their blood's in there somewhere, though.
As well. The name France even came from the Germanic Frank tribe. French is of course the official language, however, regional dialects do exist, but for the most part, they do pretty well at making sure everyone speaks it. Granted, the linguistic zones that we mentioned before each have their own flag, still cling on to their mother tongue, and sometimes you can even find street signs written in these languages. For example, Breton, a Celtic-based language related to Welsh and Irish found in Brittany, Basque in the Basque Country, Occitan in Occitania. Corsicans have like this strange half French, half Italian hybrid thing going on. Keep in mind though, most of the languages spoken in the linguistic zones are kind of dying out, and only the older generation really retains daily conversation in those languages. Outside of metropolitan France, the overseas departments and
Yo, is that a road? A road bridge? What the fuck? That's cool, but also terrifying.
territories each speak French, but in addition typically have their own creoles or dialects. For example, in the Caribbean, Martinique and Guadeloupe might say "Ça a marché, tout bon man, ti mal man." In Reunion or Mayotte, they might say "Quoi fait, comment il est, à où." France is the most visited country in the world, as more people than the entire population of France visit France annually at about 80 million. Culture-wise, there is too much to discuss. I mean, we are talking millennia of tribes, wars, empires, heroes, villains, artists, poets, architects, kings, queens, guillotines, revolutions, inventions, music, dance, clothing, fashion, cinema,
Bring back the guillotine! Eat the rich!
cuisine, discoveries, victories, losses, folklore, science, literature, medicine, and baguettes. To cover it all, we would need a whole separate YouTube channel. But for what it's worth, since the Middle Ages, France has been able to show time after time again that it has been a global force to be reckoned with. I mean, the French at one point in time had the second largest empire in the world, spanning across virtually every region on every continent. One thing you have to understand is that in a fast-growing Anglophone-driven global economy, France is very, very firmly intent on preserving the French language and culture. The governmentally sanctioned Académie Française has aimed at doing this since 1634. They do things like, somewhat unsuccessfully, banning foreign words such as blog, hashtag, parking, email, and weekend. In addition, the French media's top regulators, the CSA and CNC, have strictly enforced policies that require all music on private radio to be at least of 40% French origin and 70% in the French language between the hours of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and half the music quota must be less than 6 months old. Everything must be French. France is, of course, home
That's so fucking weird and stupid.
to a plethora of notable figures in every field of academia and athleticism. I mean, they have almost 70 Nobel Peace Prize winners, including famous chemists Pierre and Marie Curie. Few people know that they had a daughter who also became a notable scientist. Other scientists,
Nice.
writers, and philosophers like Descartes, Pascal, Baudelaire, Flaubert, Pasteur, Châtelet, Bouton, who by the way invented the metric system. Musicians like Rameau, Lully, Debussy, Jacques
Debussy.
Brel, Edith Piaf. Of course, we can't forget the fashion icons Louis Vuitton, Coco Chanel, and Christian Dior. I mean, it's no secret, France is often touted as the fashion capital of the world. Artists like Monet, Cézanne, Renoir, Degas, Manet, and Gauguin. And of course, what's an episode about France without mentioning anything about Kings Louis XIV and XVI, Joan of Arc, and Napoleon? In a simple way of putting it, French culture is very vibrant and proud. The French love where they've come from and how they go about doing things. The Catholic Church once played a major role, and to this day, even as a secular state with dwindling church attendees, many French people still, in the very least, identify nominally as Catholic, mostly for a cultural thing. It's just their history and they don't want to toss it away. They also love taking breaks and getting their sleep. On average, the French get about 8.83 hours of sleep every day, more than any other country in the developed world. And they also
Nice.
have some of the shortest work weeks with only about 6 to 7 hours on average a day. And that's enough for them. It's not uncommon to see people taking
What the fuck? Hold on, am I about to fucking move to France? 6 to 7 hour workday?
Time off in the middle of the day, early evening, just to relax and take a nap. They even have a word for it, l'heure de l'apéro, which literally translates to the hour of the aperitif. People can also claim state pension at age 62, making it one of the lowest retirement ages in the world. And of course, the sport French people rank highest in the world, going on strike. I mean,
yeah.
And the last thing you want to do is interrupt a Frenchman's nap during a 6-hour shift with corporate policy changes. Yep, the world can be a cruel, cruel place. Let's see how France survives in the jungle. When it comes to France, they don't discriminate. They hate everyone equally. No, but
They hate. They hate them. They hate Islamic people quite a bit. And there's a little bit of history with Algeria. A bit iffy.
seriously, France has their eyes on a few people, and when they see what they like, they cling on and make you a treasure. First of all, Francophone nations and Latin-based former Roman legacy nations generally get the high seats, especially their neighbors like Switzerland, Luxembourg, Italy, and Spain. Quebec, Canada is to France kind of like what the USA is to the UK. They adore each other, they love each other's accents, but they love making fun of each other even more, even though they are really close. Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia are the closest African nations as they make up the largest African immigrant demographics, followed by sub-Saharan African countries like Cameroon and Cote d'Ivoire, or Ivory Coast. For France, Japan is seen as like the epitome of exoticism. Similar to themselves, the Japanese have a rich culture of noble tradition, things like castles, attire, and food. Likewise, Japan sort of shares the same mutual fascination and see France as like its European alternate universe twin. There's no two countries that like to poke fun of and borderline harass each other with the French as the UK and the USA. As historical rivals with the UK, I mean, they did have a 100-year war with them, and the USA busting their chops about World War II all the time. All sides like to satirize each other in cartoons and media all the time. Nonetheless, they are actually really close. The UK and France have been crossing borders and intermarrying for centuries. Commerce and student exchanges are high.
Hell, the reason why the 100 Years' War started is because of them intermarrying with each other.
The US was helped by the French during the Revolutionary War, and they even gave the Statue of Liberty as a present. So fellow Americans, thank France for Lady Liberty, okay? It was a kind gesture. France's best friends, though, would probably be Germany and Belgium. It's kind of funny because historically, the only country that was consistently an opponent of France was Germany.
Historically, that would be Britain more so than Germany, I would
Ever
argue.
since the split of Charlemagne's empire in 3, most of Europe's history was driven by the overarching rivalry between variations of France and all variations of Germany, including the Holy Roman Empire, the Teutonic Order, Prussia.
I mean, yeah, that's the Holy Roman. That's a fair addition there too, I guess.
And of course, the Third Reich. But the plot twist was the creation of the EU. Following Robert Schumann's speech that states explicitly that for Europe to even hope to work, the millennia-old rivalry between France and Germany has to be resolved for good. Ever since 1950, France and Germany have taken a lot of political inspiration off of each other. Heads of states have visited each other on numerous occasions, and both countries have been the biggest advocates for the survival of the Union. And Belgium is like their little brother that moved out and got a Dutch-speaking roommate and visits France every so often to raid their fridge and do their laundry. In conclusion, les Français sont connus pour être intrépides, turbulents, mais qui gardent quand même un certain charme. Ils ont parfois l'air désinvoltes, mais bon, essayez de vivre dans un pays envahi 24 heures sur 24, 7 jours sur 7, par des hordes de touristes qui piétinent vos jardins, massacrent votre gastronomie, et vous demandez de vous plaire au moindre de leurs désirs, sans même vous dire un petit merci. Oh, France, faut le comprendre. Stay tuned. France's rich former little colony, Gabon, is coming up next.
Okay, that was Geography Now France. This might be, ooh, I don't know, is this longer than the Germany episode? I'm not sure. I think Germany is still my longest. But yeah, that was Geography Now France. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. This was definitely one of their better ones, I would say. This was really enjoyable. Peace.